Hey guys, welcome to the official reading of the very first short story here on ThreeDayStories.com. Its title, Hashimoto Station. Ikuto stood silently and gazed over the hills of Ashizuri Misaki. The green and luscious forests rolled under the violent winds of the Pacific shore. He breathed in and his lungs flooded with wet, salty air. Behind him, giant waves crashed against the rugged coast, creating a primal rumble that conjured up a healthy respect for nature's infinite power in him. This is where Ikuto felt safe. This is where he felt at home. But slowly the rumbling of the waves transformed into another, more rhythmic noise. It was the clanking of rails that had slowly sent Ikuto into his fantasy and was now pulling him out again. The Pacific winds changed back into the draft of an open window in the front of a train car, and the salty smell was quickly becoming starchy. Bowl, a dull voice sounded. Ikuto couldn't really hear it though, as he was still 1,000 miles away. Bowl! It hit him again as the train rattled over a bump in the tracks and shook him back into reality. He held out his palm-sized bowl as a grumpy little man with a hairnet scooped a ladle full of pulpy yellow mush into it. Ikuto focused on not scrunching his face in disgust and even mustered up a little bow. On the way back to his little hardwood seat, he passed the line of his comrades, waiting to be served as well. They were all about his age, 18 to 25, some appeared even younger. Their faces looked tired and worn down from working long days outside. None of them said a word or made eye contact. Only the guy on the seat next to Ikuto acknowledged him when he sat back down. Akahito was at least a foot taller than he, and Ikuto felt inferior in every sense. When Akahito spoke, everyone else in the room would stop what they were doing, because his voice would drown out everyone else. He was a favorite of their superiors, and he had even saved one of their comrades' life by pulling him out from under an excavator's wheel. That is at least what Ikuto had heard. It was thus all the more surprising that he was now sitting next to Ikuto, giving him a little nod. Salted potatoes again, Ikuto mumbled. It's disgusting. Akahito smiled. You know, they just want to keep us healthy. We need the energy and the iodine. Ikuto knew the official slogans. Everyone needs to make sacrifices, right? Akahito nodded into his bowl. I just hadn't imagined the apocalypse quite like this. Akahito looked up. You know, you shouldn't call it that. Apocalypse? Why not? It suggests that we cannot change our fate. But if we pull together and work as hard as we can, Ikuto interrupted, then we can overcome this tragedy and build a better and stronger Japan. I know the Emperor's speech is just as well. Then you know that we all have a duty to fulfill, suggested Akahito. I just didn't think it would be like this. Akahito raised a brow. Ikuto started to explain. When I was a teenager, I was never really into mangas, anime, or any of our monster movies. I always loved American zombie stories. You see, I was never a particularly social type. I didn't have many friends, I didn't really talk to anyone but my sister. Akahito kept chewing his potatoes while eyeing Ikuto, who started to shake off some of his weariness. I used to escape into fantasies about the end of the world, a global zombie apocalypse. Hordes of brain-hungry undead roaming the streets, while a few brave men and women struggle for survival. And I would be one of them. A lonely wolf warrior with a double-barreled shotgun and a hot rod to mow down zombies and save the damsel in distress. Society would have collapsed, and everyone would just be fighting for themselves. While Akahito was listening, he started to look around, trying to see if someone listened in on their conversation. And now what have we got? Something resembling rabies or the plague. Zombies that don't scare anyone? They're not zombies, Akahito interrupted. They're poor sick people that have graciously given their life by being zoned off in the north. He tried to whisper, but this nonsense made him mad, and so the words shot louder than he had meant them to. Ikuto was taken aback a bit by Akahito's sudden outburst. Nonetheless, he spoke calmly, what we have now is the exact opposite of what every horror author ever predicted. No ghost towns, no dangerous adventures, no individuality, but first and foremost, no heroes. You don't think what we're doing here is heroic? What? Repairing train tracks, shoveling gravel, building chain-link fence? Sure, we're all pitching in to keep Japan afloat. Ikuto scoffed at him. Huh. I think this is just a welcome way to make us and every other young person into well-trained worker monkeys. They teach us that everyone else needs to work for what they define as the greater good, and everyone who has other plans or ideas is labeled a traitor. You know very well that we are an aging society. It's the obligation of us young people to help with the tasks that our elderly can't handle anymore, said Akahito with a certain resolution in his voice. I have been on the road with these workforces for 4 years now. They didn't even let me finish high school before they drafted me. I haven't seen my family since then, and I just got news that my service was extended by 2 more years. Ikuto's voice dropped as those last words formed in his mouth. You should be proud then, replied Akahito. I just want to go home, said Ikuto as he buried his face in his hands. Akahito's mouth tightened and his brows dropped in an expression of worry. Ikuto quickly looked around and then slipped his hand into his pocket. He slowly pulled out a little piece of paper. I found this note in my bag a few days ago. I don't know how it got there or who put it there, but I'm sure it's from my sister. It isn't signed, but only she could have found such sweet words about how my family misses me. Are you sure? Asked Akahito. Absolutely. It says here that she wants to meet me at Hashimoto Station and then help me hide somewhere near my hometown. Have you ever been to Ashizuri Misaki? Ikuto asked as his eyes lit up. That's on Shikoku, isn't it? It's not just on Shikoku. It's the southernmost point of the whole island. It's got the freshest air you've ever smelled. Much better than around here. I have spent so many days of my childhood exploring the endless forests and coastlines around there. I would give everything to get back into those quiet mountains. You shouldn't say something like that. Or think it for that matter, urged Akahito. Ikuto evaded his stare and continued. In about 40 minutes we are scheduled for a stop in Hashimoto Station to unload a few of the train cars we picked up in Kozuku. The note gives pretty detailed instructions on how to get away and hide once we are there. I really think you should reconsider. It's just 2 more years. After that you will most likely be honorably discharged. And with a bit of luck you will get appointed a job or maybe even a place at a university on Shokoku. Then you can go home every weekend. Akahito laid a hand on Ikuto's shoulder. You seem like a nice and smart guy. Don't throw away your future for such a stupid idea. I'm not going to. My sister will be waiting for me and I know the mountains north of Ashizuri Misaki well enough to not get caught. Akahito stared outside the moving train's window for a few seconds, his face frozen in a grimace of subtle disappointment. Then he said, I wish you the best, Ikuto, got up and slowly left the train car with his empty bowl. Ikuto felt the rough piece of paper between his fingers, his eyes wandering around the dirty floor. Just 35 more minutes to go. About an hour later, Ikuto was cowered on the bowl of an abandoned toilet in Hashimoto Station. Drops of sweat ran down his face and palms. He forced out a few more grunts and moans while he thought about how he could escape. He had been led here pretending to be violently sick, holding his stomach and making gagging noises. But the promised exit from the bathroom had been sealed when the station was closed for the public. He had spent the last 20 minutes trying to convince the comrade that had volunteered to bring him here that he was still expelling fluids from every orifice. After a few more minutes, his sobbing intensified and got more believable. He realized that his escape attempt had failed. He thought about his poor sister, who must have been just 100 meters away, waiting for him, not knowing what had happened to her little brother. Ikuto pounded his hand against the white tile wall and let out a short scream of agony. He then gathered his thoughts, wiped away his tears with his sleeves, and stepped out of his bathroom stall. He took a deep breath and pushed open the door to the hallway. But no one was there. His head shot around and searched for any sign of his comrade. There was no trace of him. Ikuto couldn't quite comprehend what had happened, but this was his big chance. Each of his cautious steps got bigger and bigger until he started running down the abandoned corridor, his eyes scanning around for any exit, and of course for any guards or any of his comrades. But the empty shops and ticket counters never seemed to end. Finally he reached the main entrance, but all doors were locked and secured by chains. Even if he had the means to get through these locks, there were way too many people passing by on the outside. He would have been noticed and reported. Ikuto started running again. He knew that such a big train station would have had several side entrances. After 15 long seconds, he came by a single swinging door that had been locked without the chains. He stopped dead in his tracks and pumped his fist in victorious excitement. He felt that, if he pulled together all his strength, he could break this door open. He could be the lonely warrior he had dreamed of being, if only he had his shotgun. He took 3 deep breaths, closed his eyes, and charged at the door with his right shoulder. The first hit immensely. By the time he hit the hard metal plate that covered the door for the 3rd and 4th time, his shoulder couldn't possibly take any more. His collarbone might have already broken in the last try. He couldn't really feel the difference anymore. Lifting up his arm stung even more, but forcing his elbow through the thick glass seemed like his last chance. His elbow hit the pane over and over, but there wasn't a crack to be seen. Ikuto's breath got heavier and heavier with exhaustion and desperation, until finally there was only a trembling whine left. All his hopes slowly drained from his mind and left a loneliness like he, the loner, had never felt before. "Come on now, Ikuto," a voice suddenly sounded only a few steps away from him. "You didn't really think that you could just get up and leave all your responsibilities behind?" Ikuto looked up and saw 3 figures standing behind him. It was the comrade who accompanied him to the bathroom, his group leader, and, holding the comrade by a pair of shackles, Akahito. You ratted me out," yelled Ikuto. "But why?" "Don't be silly, Ikuto," replied Akahito. "I didn't rat you out." Ikuto's face distorted with disgust about the blatant lie. "I couldn't have ratted you out even if I wanted to. Everyone already knew, but I didn't tell anyone else." Akahito continued, "Who do you think put that note in your pocket?" He fixated Ikuto's scanning eyes. Then he pulled out a pack of small papers and threw them at him. Even as the little slips were still falling, Ikuto could see what they were. "You're lying! This one's from my sister!" he screamed as he held up his paper, which looked identical to all the others on the floor. "Is it?" asked Akahito. "Or is it from someone's grandma? Or a long-lost friend? Or someone's secret lover?" Ikuto shook his head. Slowly it began to sink in what had happened. "Why do you think there's no name on there? So that fools like you can see in them whatever they value more than their country. Only a traitor to Japan would blindly jump at such a blatantly fake opportunity to fail his comrades and his country." Ikuto took deep breaths as he stared motionless onto the sea of little paper slips in front of him. "Well, lucky for you, at least some of your dreams will come true after all. Since we now know how much you love nature and mountains, I can gladly tell you that there are special missions waiting for you in the quarantine zone north of Morioka." "No," slid out of Ikuto's lips. "As you might know, they've got a lot of beautiful nature up there. Trees, mountains, lots of fresh air, just as you wished. And the people there are, well, let's say friendly. If they get a visitor up there, they rarely let them leave again. Must be the local hospitality." Ikuto's head fell towards his chest. "Don't worry. If you're still alive in 2 years, you can reapply for the workforces," laughed Akahito, and turned to leave with the other comrades. But up until now, no one seemed to have had the wish to return. As the group leader picked up Ikuto, his fingers loosened their grip on the piece of paper that had meant the world to him. It gently tumbled as it followed its inescapable downward spiral. When it landed, it had become just another lost hope, and just another broken dream. This was Hashimoto Station. So, this was the very first short story here on ThreeDayStories.com. I hope you liked it. If so, please feel free to call me up on Twitter, join my Facebook page, get right onto my YouTube channel and look at all the other videos, which I have hopefully put up by now. And let me know what you think. Leave a comment or a tweet. The drawing of the next 3 subjects has already happened, and you can find the link right after this video. Be sure to check 3daystories.com every 3 days at least, and have fun. See you next time.